Mama!
The little girl screamed first. "Mama!" The cry echoed through the stone courtroom, so raw and frightened that every whispered conversation died instantly. 6-year-old Lily tore free from the maid holding her hand and threw herself around her mother's waist, burying her face into the worn black dress that had already been mended too many times to count. "No,
Don't let them take
please,
me.
don't let them take me." Her tiny fingers clung so tightly they turned white. Across the courtroom, 3 officials from the Crown's Debt Tribunal stood beside 2 constables, waiting for the judge's order. On the opposite side sat Lord Percival Ashcombe, a wealthy landowner whose polished smile never reached his eyes. He wasn't looking at the widow. He was looking at the child. Like she already belonged to him, widow Eleanor Hartley dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around her daughter. Her voice cracked. "Please." She looked toward the judge, then toward the men preparing the custody documents, then back to her daughter. "Please don't take my daughter." Silence swallowed the courtroom. The judge removed his spectacles. "Mrs. Hartley," he said quietly, "your debts remain unpaid. Under the Child Protection and Estate Recovery Act, custody must be transferred until suitable guardianship is established." Lily looked up. "What does that mean?" Eleanor couldn't answer, because she knew. It meant they were about to separate forever. The first constable stepped forward. Lily screamed again. Then, the enormous courtroom doors exploded open. Every head turned. Heavy boots echoed across polished marble. 1, 2, 3, measured, unhurried, certain. Even before anyone announced him, the room changed. Fear has a strange way of arriving before the person who carries it. The judges straightened. Lawyers lowered their voices. Even Lord Ashcombe's confident smile faded. The man entering wore a long black military coat over noble dress clothes, rain still dripping from the shoulders. A silver wolf crest gleamed on his chest. Everyone recognized it. The Duke of Blackthorn, the man whispered about across the kingdom, the commander who had ended the border rebellion in 13 days, the noble who never smiled, the duke who supposedly feared nothing. He walked directly to Eleanor, stopped beside her, looked once at the terrified little girl hiding behind her mother, then lifted his eyes toward the judge. "I object." The courtroom froze. The judge blinked. "Your Grace, I object," the Duke repeated. "There is no legal guardian," the judge answered carefully. "There can be." The Duke's gaze settled on Eleanor. His next words stunned everyone. "If you wish to keep your daughter," he paused, "marry me. If stories about courage, sacrifice, and unexpected love move you, take a moment to subscribe and join us. Every week we bring unforgettable stories where hope rises in the darkest moments, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. 3 months earlier, rain had a way of making grief heavier. The mourners had already left. The flowers placed on Captain Thomas Hartley's grave were beginning to wilt beneath the cold spring drizzle. Only one person remained. Eleanor. She stood alone before the fresh earth, one hand resting on the tiny shoulder of her daughter. Lily looked up at the carved stone. "Mama?" "Yes? When is Papa coming home?" The question struck harder than any shovel of dirt. Eleanor forced a smile. "Papa's home now." Lily frowned. "But this isn't home." "No." Eleanor knelt until they were eye level. "It's where we come to remember how much he loved us. Children understand love long before they understand death." Lily simply nodded, then carefully placed a single white daisy on the grave. "I'll tell you about my reading lessons next time," she whispered. Eleanor turned away before her daughter could see the tears. Thomas had promised. One more campaign, one more year serving the crown. Then they would buy the little cottage overlooking the river. He'd already drawn sketches. A swing beneath the oak tree. A garden Lily could help plant. A room with blue curtains because Eleanor once mentioned she loved the color. They had planned an ordinary life, ordinary dreams. War stole them all. The first bill arrived 5 days after the funeral. The second arrived 2 days later. Then another. Then another. Military pensions, Eleanor quickly discovered, sounded generous when politicians spoke about them. Reality looked very different. Thomas had borrowed heavily before leaving for the frontier, not for gambling, not for luxury, for medicine. When Lily nearly died of scarlet fever 2 winters earlier, Thomas had borrowed from anyone willing to lend. He always intended to repay every coin. He never came home. Now the debts belonged to Eleanor. She spread the letters across the kitchen table late one evening. Rent, medical loans, property tax, funeral expenses, interest, interest on interest. She counted the remaining coins, enough for perhaps 9 days, maybe 10 if she skipped meals. She quietly pushed the bread toward Lily instead. "Aren't you hungry?" "I ate earlier." It was a lie, one Lily was still too young to recognize. By midsummer, Eleanor had sold nearly everything. Thomas's watch, her mother's silver necklace, the rocking chair he'd built before Lily was born. Each item carried memories. Each memory became another week's survival. Still, it wasn't enough. The landlord began visiting twice a week. The baker stopped extending credit. Neighbors who once smiled suddenly found reasons to stay inside whenever she walked past. Poverty has a cruel habit. It doesn't only empty your pockets, it empties rooms. One afternoon, Lily came running into the kitchen holding a torn doll. "Mama, what happened?" I tried fixing her. The little doll's cloth arm had fallen off completely. "I'm sorry." Eleanor stared at it, then laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because she suddenly realized they were exactly alike. Both stitched together, both barely holding. She found a needle. Together, they repaired the doll. Crooked, uneven, far from perfect. But Lily hugged it like treasure. Sometimes children teach adults that love isn't measured by perfection, only by presence. The knock came just before sunset. 3 men. Dark coats, expensive boots, debt collectors. The oldest unfolded a document. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartley. Yes, you have 30 days. I've already paid twice this month. Interest accumulated. I need more time." "You've had time." Lily quietly peeked from behind the doorway. One collector noticed. His eyes lingered. Then he whispered something to another man. Eleanor didn't like the way they looked at her daughter, not at all. That evening she visited every business in town. Laundry, no vacancies. School, already staffed. Tailor, business too slow. Housekeeper, overqualified, undervalued, unwanted. Every rejection sounded polite. Every door still closed. By the time darkness settled, her shoes were soaked through. She sat alone on a bench outside the church. For the first time since Thomas died, she broke. Not the quiet tears she'd hidden from Lily. Real sobs, the kind that steal your breath, the kind that leave nothing behind. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered into empty air. "I promised him I'd protect her. You already have." A deep voice answered behind her. She startled. A tall man stood beneath the church lantern, simple dark clothing, travel cloak, no noble insignia, no escort, just a stranger. "You shouldn't apologize for grieving," he said. "I wasn't. You were." She managed a tired smile. "I suppose I was." He reached into his pocket and quietly placed a small loaf of fresh bread beside her. "For your daughter." "I can't accept charity." "It isn't charity." "What is it?" "A debt." She looked confused. "I don't know you." "No." His expression became unreadable. "But I knew your husband." Before she could ask another question, church bells rang. When she looked up, the stranger had already disappeared into the rain. leaving only the bread behind. Miles away, inside Blackthorn Castle, the same man removed his travel cloak. An elderly steward bowed. "You found her, Your Grace?" "Yes." "And?" The Duke stared into the fireplace for a long moment. "Thomas never told her. The captain wanted to protect your reputation. He protected my life." The steward nodded slowly. Many years earlier, during the border campaign, a young officer named Thomas Hartley had dragged an unconscious commander from a burning bridge while enemy cannons destroyed everything around them. The commander survived. Thomas carried the scars. Neither man ever spoke publicly about it, but the commander never forgot. That commander had become the Duke of Blackthorn, and now the man who had once saved his life was gone, leaving behind a widow, a little girl, and enemies already circling. The steward finally asked the question hanging in the room. "What will you do?" The Duke answered without hesitation. "Whatever I must." Outside, lightning flashed over Blackthorn Castle. Far away, another carriage rolled toward the capital. Inside sat Lord Percival Ashcombe, smiling, resting a hand upon a sealed envelope. Inside that envelope was the first piece of evidence that could destroy Eleanor Hartley. And if his plan succeeded, she would lose far more than her home. She would lose her daughter, forever. Eleanor barely slept that night. The stranger from the church kept replaying in her mind. His voice, his eyes, the strange way he had spoken about Thomas, as though he carried a burden he had never been able to repay. She had almost convinced herself she imagined the encounter. Until morning came. A polished black carriage stopped outside her tiny cottage. Children abandoned their games. Neighbors pulled back their curtains. No one in their village had ever seen a carriage like that. Its doors bore a silver wolf, the crest of Blackthorn. The coachman stepped down. "Mrs. Hartley." Eleanor opened the door cautiously. "Yes?" "His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn, requests the honor of your presence." Her heart skipped. "The Duke? The carriage is waiting." Blackthorn Castle looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Massive stone walls stretched toward the grey sky. The gates opened without a sound. Servants bowed as Eleanor entered, though she couldn't understand why. She wore the only dress she owned that wasn't patched at the elbows. Beside polished marble floors and towering chandeliers, it looked painfully out of place. Lily squeezed her mother's hand. "Mama." "Yes? Do princesses live here?" Eleanor smiled despite herself. "I think even princesses would get lost." The little girl giggled. It was the first time Eleanor had heard that sound in weeks. The Duke waited inside the library. Without the military coat, without the medals, he looked less terrifying than the stories claimed. Older than she expected. Tired. A man carrying responsibilities no one else could see. He stood as they entered. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, he bowed. Not deeply, but respectfully. "Mrs. Hartley, you know who I am." "I do. You knew Thomas. I owe him more than words can explain." Lily peeked from behind her mother. The Duke looked down. "What is your name?" "Lily." He nodded. "A beautiful name." She stared. "You aren't scary." Silence. The steward nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Eleanor's face turned crimson. "Lily, what? You shouldn't say things like that." The Duke's lips twitched. Almost. Barely. But unmistakably. The steward froze. He had served the Duke for 23 years. He had never seen him nearly smile. Tea arrived. No one touched it. Finally, Eleanor asked the question that mattered. "Why am I here?" The Duke walked toward the fireplace. Years seemed to settle on his shoulders. 7 years ago, my regiment was surrounded. There was fire. Collapsed bridges. Enemy cavalry. I should have died. He looked directly at her. "Your husband carried me across that bridge while it was falling." Eleanor's eyes widened. "He never told me." "He wouldn't. He believed debts paid in honor should remain private. The Duke reached inside a locked cabinet. He removed an old military journal. The edges were burned. Inside, a page written in Thomas's own handwriting. If I survive, I'll forget today. If I don't, tell my wife I chose her and Lily every single day, even when duty carried me away. Eleanor covered her mouth. Those were Thomas's words, his handwriting, his heart. She cried quietly. The Duke waited. Some grief deserves silence more than comfort. Commander, I've watched from a distance, he finally admitted. I believed the crown would honor his sacrifice. It didn't. No, it failed him. It failed you. Eleanor looked up. So why tell me this now? Because someone else has begun moving against your family. He placed another document before her. It bore Lord Ashcombe's seal. He has purchased every debt connected to your husband's estate. Her blood ran cold. Why? Because he isn't interested in the debt. What does he want? The Duke answered softly. Lily. The room suddenly felt colder. Eleanor stood. No, he can't. He intends to. Why? We don't know. But wealthy men rarely spend fortunes collecting impossible debts without another objective. She wrapped both arms around her daughter. I won't let anyone take her. I know. The Duke's voice remained calm. But the law may. Over the next hour, he explained everything. Ashcombe had quietly purchased loans from every creditor. The mortgage, medical debt, tax obligations, funeral expenses. He now legally controlled them all. In exactly 30 days, he could petition the court, not simply for repayment, but for custody. The law claimed it protected children from extreme poverty. Sometimes, it protected greed instead. Eleanor sat speechless. She had spent months believing fate was against her. She now realized someone had been arranging every step. That evening, as mother and daughter prepared to leave, the Duke spoke. There is one solution. She stopped. What solution? It will protect Lily. I'm listening. It will erase the debts. She turned. What must I do? The Duke met her eyes. Marry me. The words landed like thunder. Even the servants stopped moving. Eleanor stared. Surely she had misunderstood. You cannot be serious. I am. You don't even know me. I knew the man who trusted you with everything. Marriage isn't payment, no. It is protection. She shook her head. People will talk. They already do. They'll think I trapped you. They already think worse. I can't ask that of you. You didn't. I offered. She left without answering. That night, sleep refused to come. She watched Lily curled beneath worn blankets. One tiny hand still wrapped around the repaired doll. Marriage. To the most feared duke in the kingdom. A complete stranger, it sounded impossible. Wrong. Almost insulting to Thomas's memory. Yet another voice whispered inside her heart. Would Thomas care more about appearances or Lily's future? She already knew the answer. 3 days later, Ashcombe made his first move. The village school refused Lily's enrollment. The tuition has already been withdrawn. The baker suddenly demanded immediate payment. The landlord delivered eviction papers. Then came whispers, cruel ones. Children repeated things they'd heard their parents say. My father says your mama owes everybody. My mother says poor children go to orphan houses. Lily came home crying. Mama, they said they'll take me away. Eleanor dropped everything and held her daughter. No, they're lying. But what if they aren't? For a moment, she couldn't answer, because she no longer knew. That evening, a brick shattered the cottage window. Lily screamed. Attached to the brick, a folded note. Pay your debts, or the child pays for them. Eleanor's hands trembled. This wasn't about money anymore. Someone wanted fear, and they were succeeding. The Duke arrived before sunrise. He hadn't been summoned. Someone inside the village had informed him. He silently examined the broken glass, the threatening letter, the frightened little girl. His jaw tightened. Whoever did this crossed a line. Eleanor looked exhausted. I can handle poverty. I can survive gossip. But Lily, her voice broke. They're frightening my little girl. The Duke knelt before Lily. May I ask you something? She nodded. Are you brave? She sniffled. I try. I believe you. He reached into his pocket. It was a small carved wooden wolf. Its edges had been smoothed by years of use. I carried this during every battle. She looked amazed. For luck, for courage. She accepted it carefully. Will it protect me? The Duke smiled. No. You already have everything you need. It will simply remind you. Lily hugged the tiny carving. I'll keep it forever. As the Duke stood, Eleanor noticed something. For all the terrifying stories about him, he had spoken to Lily more gently than anyone else had in months. Perhaps monsters weren't always the people the world feared. Sometimes they wore expensive smiles, like Lord Ashcombe. 2 days later, the proposal became public. The capital erupted. The Duke of Blackthorn is marrying a bankrupt widow. Impossible. She must have bewitched him. She's after his fortune. The newspapers printed cruel caricatures. Noble women laughed behind silk fans. Men questioned the Duke's judgment. He ignored every word. But Eleanor heard all of them. Each rumor felt like another stone thrown through her window. The wedding itself was remarkably quiet. No royal celebration, no orchestra, no lavish feast. Just a chapel, a handful of witnesses, a priest, the Duke, the widow, and one little girl holding wildflowers she had picked herself. When the ceremony ended, Lily tugged on the Duke's sleeve. So, he looked down. Yes? What do I call you now? The chapel fell silent. Eleanor looked away. She hadn't prepared for this. The Duke knelt until they were eye level. You may call me whatever makes you comfortable. Lily thought very hard, then smiled. I'll call you Your Grumpy Grace. The priest burst into laughter. Even the stern steward covered his face. The Duke sighed dramatically. I suppose that could have been worse. It could, yes. You might have called me old. I'm saving that. For the first time in many years, the chapel echoed with genuine laughter. It felt strangely like family. Neither Eleanor nor the Duke noticed the man watching from the shadows outside. Lord Ashcombe folded a newspaper and smiled. So, they're married. His solicitor nodded. Shall we withdraw? Ashcombe's smile widened. No. This is where the real game begins. He reached into his coat and removed a sealed birth record. One carefully forged document. One convincing lie. One piece of paper claiming that Lily Hartley had never been Thomas Hartley's child at all. If the court believed it, the Duke's marriage would protect nothing. Instead, it would destroy every one of them. The rain had not stopped. It streaked across the courthouse windows like tears no one could wipe away. Inside, every seat was occupied. Nobles, lawyers, curious townspeople, reporters with sharpened pencils. No one had come because they cared about a poor widow. They had come because the kingdom's most feared duke was about to stand against the law itself, and perhaps lose. We returned to the moment where everything seemed lost. Lily clung to Eleanor with every ounce of strength her tiny body possessed. Mama, I'm scared. Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead. So am I. But we'll be together, she prayed. Those words were true. Across the courtroom, Lord Percival Ashcombe sat with absolute confidence. His attorneys stacked documents neatly on the table. One folder remained closed. That was the one he intended to use like a knife. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. The matter before this court, the judge announced, Concerns custody of the minor child, Lily Hartley, following outstanding estate obligations and questions surrounding legal parentage. Those last two words echoed through the room. Legal parentage. Ashcombe smiled. His lawyer stood first. My lord, while the Duke of Blackthorn has recently married the widow Eleanor Hartley, new evidence raises serious doubts regarding whether Captain Thomas Hartley was ever the biological father of this child. Gasps filled the room. Eleanor felt the world tilt. What? The lawyer calmly produced a folded document. A birth declaration signed by a midwife. The paper claimed Thomas had been away at war during Lily's conception. It claimed Eleanor had hidden an affair. It claimed Lily had no lawful inheritance, no legal father, no protection. The whispers exploded. I knew something was strange. So the child is illegitimate. The Duke has been deceived. Lily looked around, confused. She didn't understand the word. She only understood how people were staring at her, like she had done something wrong. She buried her face against Eleanor. Why are they angry with me? Eleanor couldn't breathe. The judge examined the document. His expression darkened. This is troubling. Ashcombe stood. My lord, while I sympathize with the widow, the law cannot ignore fraudulent claims of inheritance. He turned toward Eleanor with practiced sorrow. I merely wished to provide the child with stability. It was the cruelest lie he had ever spoken. The Duke rose slowly. Until now, he had remained silent. Every eye followed him. I have one question. Ashcombe smiled. Of course. The Duke's voice remained calm. When was this document discovered? Recently. By whom? A private investigator. Name him. A pause. He prefers anonymity. I see. The Duke looked toward the judge. May I present my evidence? The judge nodded. You may. The Duke placed an old leather journal onto the clerk's table. The late Captain Thomas Hartley's campaign journal. Ashcombe laughed quietly. A diary proves nothing. No. It proves where he actually was. The Duke opened to a bookmarked page. Every military movement, every supply stop, every officer's signature, every date. One entry matched the exact week Ashcombe claimed Thomas had been hundreds of miles away. Instead, Thomas had been home. Official leave, approved by the Crown. The courtroom fell silent. The Duke continued. I also requested copies from the Royal Army Archives. A clerk hurried forward carrying sealed military records. The judge examined them. His eyebrows lifted. The dates match. Perfectly. Ashcombe shifted in his chair for the first time. The Duke wasn't finished. I would also like to call Mrs. Agnes Whitmore. An elderly woman entered slowly with a walking cane. The courtroom recognized her immediately. She had served as the village midwife for nearly 40 years. The judge asked gently, Mrs. Whitmore, did you sign this birth declaration? She adjusted her spectacles, took one look, then frowned. No. The courtroom erupted. That isn't my handwriting, she pointed with surprising certainty. And that seal. I stopped using that stamp 2 years before Lily was born. Ashcombe's lawyer paled. Mrs. Whitmore continued. I delivered Lily myself. She smiled toward Eleanor. Captain Hartley fainted before the baby even arrived. Laughter rippled across the courtroom. He cried harder than the child did. Eleanor covered her mouth, laughing through tears. That sounded exactly like Thomas. For the first time since the trial began. Hope returned. Gore Ashcombe slammed his fist onto the table. She's old. Memory fades. The Duke looked directly at him. Forgery does not. He turned toward the judge. My lord, I hired handwriting experts. Another report appeared. The signatures do not match. The ink is newer. The paper itself was manufactured 3 years after Lily's birth. Silence. The judge slowly lowered the forged document. His disappointment was unmistakable. "Lord Ashcombe, do you wish to explain?" Ashcombe said nothing, because he couldn't. But desperate people rarely stop after one lie. His expression hardened. "Fine. Perhaps the document was inaccurate, but the debts remain. The widow still cannot provide. The child still deserves better." He pointed toward Eleanor. "What future can she offer? A cottage already taken? Empty cupboards? Charity?" His voice rose. "Love does not feed children." The words hung heavily in the courtroom. Then, a tiny voice answered, "Yes, it does." Everyone turned. Lily had stepped away from her mother. Her hands trembled, but she stood anyway. "My mama always eats last." The room became still. "She tells me she isn't hungry, but I wake up at night. I hear her tummy." Several people lowered their eyes. Lily continued, "She fixed my doll. She sings when I'm scared. She says Papa loved me every day." The little girl looked directly at Ashcombe. "I don't know you. You never tucked me into bed. You never held my hand. You only want me because of papers." The silence that followed was heavier than any speech. Some of the spectators quietly wiped away tears. The judge removed his glasses. He needed a moment. Not because the law had changed, but because everyone in the room had just remembered what the law was supposed to protect. Children, not fortunes. The Duke stepped forward once more. "My lord, I have one final request." The judge nodded. "Proceed. Proceed." The Duke turned toward Eleanor, then toward Lily. Finally, he faced the court. "When I asked Eleanor Hartley to marry me, many believed it was pity. It was not. They believed it was obligation. It was not. I married her because a man of honor once saved my life. He asked for nothing. And now, I ask for something." He drew a folded legal document from inside his coat. "I petition this court to approve the immediate adoption of Lily Hartley." Whispers swept across the room. The judge blinked. "Your Grace, you understand what this means?" "I do. She becomes your legal heir." "Yes." "She gains inheritance rights." "Yes." "You permanently assume every responsibility." The Duke answered without hesitation. "Gladly." He walked toward Lily, knelt before her. His voice became softer than anyone thought possible. "I lost the chance to repay your father. I will not lose the chance to protect his daughter." His eyes glistened, not from weakness, from gratitude. Then he said the words no one would ever forget. "She has always been my daughter." Lily stared at him. For a heartbeat, she simply looked. Then she threw her arms around his neck. "Can I call you Papa now?" The Duke closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. "I've been hoping you would." There wasn't a dry eye left in the courtroom. Even the bailiff quietly turned away. The judge smiled for the first time that day. "This court recognizes the adoption." He struck the gavel. "Effective immediately. Lily Hartley." He paused. "No. Lily Blackthorne. You are hereby recognized as the lawful daughter of His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorne." The courtroom erupted, not in scandal, in applause. Lord Ashcombe tried to leave quietly. He never reached the door. Two royal investigators blocked his path. One unfolded a warrant. "Lord Percival Ashcombe, you are under investigation for fraud, forgery, attempted unlawful seizure of a minor, and conspiracy against the crown." His face drained of color. The same man who had entered smiling, left in chains. Months later, Blackthorne Castle no longer felt cold. Laughter echoed through halls once filled only with silence. The servants smiled more often. Fresh flowers appeared in windows. The old steward insisted it was because the castle finally had a child again. He was probably right. One sunny afternoon, the garden was alive with color. Lily raced across the grass, chasing butterflies with the carved wooden wolf still tucked safely inside her pocket. The Duke sat beneath the oak tree reading military correspondence, or at least pretending to. Every few seconds he looked up to make sure Lily hadn't wandered too far. Eleanor noticed. "You've checked on her 11 times. I have not. 12, he sighed. Old habits." She smiled. "No, father's habits." He looked toward Lily again. Perhaps she was right. Eleanor reached into a small wooden box she had finally unpacked. Inside lay Thomas's journal. She opened to the final page. One sentence had always been her favorite. "A person's true wealth is measured by the people who would stand beside their family after they're gone." She closed the journal gently. Thomas had been right. He had left no fortune, no estate, no treasures. He had left something greater. Honor, the kind that survives death, the kind that returns when you least expect it, the kind that transforms strangers into family. Years later, when people asked Lily Blackthorne how she became the daughter of the kingdom's most feared duke, she never spoke about courtrooms, forged papers, or cruel men. She simply smiled and said, "My first father gave me life. My second father kept his promise, and my mother taught them both what love was worth." Sometimes the strongest families are not the ones born together. They are the ones who choose each other, again and again, no matter what the world says. And that choice can change generations.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that love is stronger than blood, and that family is defined not only by birth, but by the promises we keep. Tell us in the comments, what moment moved you the most? The proposal, the courtroom, or Lily calling the Duke Papa? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next unforgettable story.